Rodrigo, I want to start with you. This is your story. You're a former Mexican congressman. You were recently convicted, and the charge was upheld of gender-based political violence. I want to get into what exactly you've been accused of, but take us through the events that led to this.
It was gender in the Congress. A transsexual legislator present initiative of bill that want to punish people of faith and ministers of Christian religions as a hate speech, even if they quote the Bible. So I expressed my rejection to that bill because it was going to be an attempt against the religious freedom. I explained that this is a very important issue, and I explained also that the way this transsexual legislator present that bill disguised or dressed up like a drag pope, it was not a very respectful way to ask for respect. And I explained that a transsexual legislator is a man that conceive or ascribe himself as a woman. And all the hell broke. And after that message that was transmitted by Twitter and Facebook was the elements of this suing and demandings. And it was something shocking because the freedom of expression, the debate, democratic debate, was crushed by this suing and this demand.
So, when you put up a tweet or a message and you say that this is a man who self-ascribes as a woman, that would seem in many people's minds to be an accurate statement. Of course, I know that people who are in the transgender community would say, no, I'm actually a woman, and you can get into that whole debate. But Tomas, I want to come to you on this because the fact that this even became a case, right? You can have a debate about whether or not you agree with what was said or tweeted. What was your reaction when you first heard about this case before you guys took it on?
Well, I'm sorry to say that I'm not really surprised. We're seeing a global trend pop up really everywhere of a violation of freedom of expression and restrictions that go well beyond what is allowed by international human rights law, even by constitutional norms in the different states, in terms of just restricting and acting as a de facto censorship on, political speech in this case, and even religious speech in some others, stifling public debate. So my reaction was that I was not entirely surprised, although there are certain specific features of this case that are still very surprising and I would say shocking.
And what are those fixtures in this case that you think are maybe a little more abnormal or alarm raising?
Well, Rodrigo's case doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a general context today in Mexico, and this relates to other cases as we as ADF International are taking on, in which this system of what the state calls electoral justice is creating an enforcement mechanism by which proponents of progressive ideology, in this case personified in Salma Ruébano, who is the transgender lawmaker that Rodrigo has referred to, is using the legal system as his personal cudgel to silence those that would not only issue criticism to his political action and decisions, but also to gender ideology itself. The mere fact that you would question today in Mexico that a male who identifies as a woman is not truly a woman has become unlawful. And this has been the decision that has been upheld by the courts over time. So they're depriving people the ability to participate in one of the most relevant and central debates of our times, which is really a question of what is truth, what is a woman.
Yeah, and I thank you for setting that up, because I want to come back to you, Rodrigo, on this, because you said that everything, the minute that you posted that message, everything went crazy. Let's talk about, I think people probably have a number of questions in light of sort of the context here. You post that, this transgender lawmaker becomes infuriated, I imagine. What were the steps that happened next? How did this go from something you tweeted into something you ended up in court battling?
This is, I think, multi-level madness, because this goes from this expression transmitted in social media to a court, and then to the final electoral court, without being related with any campaign or candidate. It was a democratic parliamentary debate. Finally, this arrives to a level that the Mexican court has created out of nothing a mandatory incriticability that cancels parliamentary debate, public debate, freedom of expression, and religious freedom. And this, what implies this? Dismantling democracy and imposing a single ideological thought without scientific or legal basis. We see a pattern here. A member of the regime goes to the National Electoral Institute, and this one takes this case to the electoral court. With this pattern, we have right now 2 cardinals, 3 bishops, 2 priests, and 2 members of Congress that has been sentenced. So the fundamental freedoms are greatly threatened in Mexico by the gender confusion ideology and an authoritarian regime.
Rodrigo, you lost this case, right? Then you appeal and you lose it again. You were fined, correct? Talk a little bit about the fine, and then also talk about, because the other part of this, and then Tomas, I'll come to you on this, that I found really disturbing, were the other things the court wanted you to do, like apologize. So talk a little bit about the fine, the apology, and also the registry that you have to place your name on.
Yes, they want to put like a public humiliation and a brainwash together, because I have to take, I don't remember, 10 or 15 gender normalization in order to deconstruct myself, that are their words, in order to subordinate to what they want us to say. So that is...
Are those classes? I'm sorry, are those like classes that they're going to make you take?
Yes.
Wow.
This is programs that they have to gender normalization. So even the name, it's awful, because it's more related with these authoritarian regimes in the former Soviet Union. And the fines, it's they wanted me to pay 2 fines. One for my organization, National Front for the Family, another by myself. Well, that was a discussion, but I have to pay. And they put me in this list, blacklist, and they want to, this list, have even more consequences. There are these bills that want that the people that are in this list cannot be elected or re-elected to any position in representation in any Congress, that you cannot be named in a public administration position in any part of Mexico, and other consequences. So they want to cancel the speech that they hate, not because it's hate speech. No, it's because they hate the speech that we could say with freedom.
Tomas, as I'm listening to this, so how common is it that something like this would even make it to court? I know you said that you weren't shocked by this, and we are seeing cases around the world, and then you would force somebody, because of a tweet, to go on a registry of some sort. Can you give us a little more context on that registry? Because that to me seems to be one of the most troubling pieces of this case.
Sure. Well, to your first question, I mean, it really depends on where in the world we're looking at. It's certainly not the case that it would be common here in the U.S., but around the world, and especially we've seen this already in Mexico, in Argentina, to some extent in Guatemala, is that the moment that, let's call them activists, realize that they have an avenue for enforcement of their orthodoxies in the courts, they'll use that avenue. The Mexican legal system is in some ways special. This, what we refer to as the electoral justice system, we've unfortunately found out the hard way that it has been, I say, populated by people that describe themselves as allies of Salma Ruébano and her colleagues or companions in again what they themselves called their struggle and their fight. So I mentioned this because in the case of Rodrigo, two of the judges that ruled on his appeal had actually made such comments publicly, stating that they considered themselves to be Salman Ruébano's ally, and thanked him, that they would say her, in helping them deconstruct themselves and be or be constructive in allyship. Now, there was a recusal request that was filed against both of those judges in the case, and yet they both refused to do so. So this is one of the issues that we see as a fundamental injustice that we hope will be reversed once we take this case to the international sphere. But this is the kind of situation on the ground that we find specifically in Mexico at this point. To your second question with respect to the registry, as Rodrigo has already mentioned, the whole point here is to create a sort of blacklist of humiliation for those that have been convicted. And you're putting in the same vein people that have quite literally been convicted of violent physical aggression against women, with others that, like Rodrigo, have simply voiced their opposition to a political agenda. And yet the registry here makes no distinction. They are all taken to be gender political violators and or gender-based violators, and so put in the registry. This has also potential ramifications in the legal sense because, and this is an issue that is to this point up in the air in Mexico, the electoral justice system considers that those that have been including in the register for gender-based offenders are not allowed to register themselves for election to public office or to serve in any public office whatsoever because of the fact of having been committed of such an offense. And so in the case of Rodrigo and others, this also becomes a problem for the exercise of their political rights, of which they're being deprived, disenfranchised because of this conviction.
There are so many issues there of concern with this case. You mentioned, Tomas, going international. Now, obviously, different legal system in Mexico. Have all of the options within Mexico been exhausted now? And then what happens next?
They have. That is one of the requirements in order to take a case to international courts or organizations, quasi-jurisdictional bodies, which is what we're going to do now. We are currently working on our petition, which we will file with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, with the expectation that this case will ultimately make it all the way to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and a human rights court that has jurisdiction over Mexico and 22 other states of the Americas, with the exclusion of the United States and Canada. And that our hope is, and our plea, that justice will be served for Rodrigo and for all others that are like himself in this situation, being deprived of their fundamental rights and their right to stand and speak for truth.
Rodrigo, last question for you on this. I know one of the other things was publishing an apology. And the reports are that was a daily thing that needed to happen for 30 days. You can clarify that here, but do you plan to publish the apologies, pay the fine? Are you going to comply with all these things? Are you not going to, as this process forges on?
Yes, in order to go to the international sphere, I must put that text that they order me to put in social networks. I have to pay this. I'm very willing to take these gender normalization programs because I'm a teacher at the university. So I know something about teachings and programs, educational programs. So I'm going to take at least some of them in order to say all the public what is happening and what they are trying to impose to us. Because I spoke out against a proposed law that would impose a blanket prohibition on Christian teachings about sexuality and hate speech. And because I took a stand for fundamental freedoms and protection of children, I was charged and convicted as a violent offender. And this violence, it's a very tricky thing. This includes gender-based, digital, symbolic, psychological, and sexual political violence. So free speech, I consider, is not violence as they put it. The self-evident truth is that a man can never be a woman. And it's deeply unjust for those who stand bravely in defense for the truth ones like this. So I'm going to make this public point as public as I possibly could do and follow the international path in this issue.
Well, I appreciate you both coming on and talking about this. Free speech and religious freedom are two of the fundamental, most important rights, and your story is absolutely crazy on so many levels. I appreciate you sharing today.
Thank you.